introduction. Good morning. We will make a presentation of the session with the title Critical Approaches to Urban Practices and Policies. There are some paper presentations. We will begin with the second presentation, Mrs. Stella Bolonaki. The title of the presentation is Creative Art Practices, Sources of Global Cosmopolitanism or of Local Cooperativism. Please.
Okay.
Ναι. Τι βλέπετε? Άλλο το full screen.
Okay. So, good morning. Thank you everyone for being here, and especially the organizer committee for the invitation to participate. Creative art practices, sources of global cosmopolitanism or of local cooperativism. The intention of this presentation is not to answer the question, but to discuss what creativity means today and what is the role of participatory art in the current gentrification policies, focuses on the current Athens creative-led urban transformations. As we know, since 2019, the city of Athens experiencing major regeneration processes. Along with great projects, e.g. Unicorn Fire Bay, is taking place a series of inner city structural changes, including renovation of Main Square, ambitious plans such as the Great Walk, converting of architecturally significant buildings into cultural venues, the opening of international galleries in ongoing gentrification processes. The migration of artists to downtown has been involved into an organized policy of rapid urban regeneration, having transformed the city's cultural geography, causing the displacement of local activities from certain neighborhoods, such as Kypsei, Exarchia, or Koukaki. As far as the city cosmopolitanism is concerned, the exhibition Learning from Athens was organized in 2017 by the German institution of Documenta, encapsulated the Reassessing Athens Cultural Values, in which is formulating the current Athens creative-led urban strategy. Documenta recalled the city as a new Berlin by implying cosmopolitanism that first meets property developers' desires. The exhibition Learning of Athens formulated for 100 days its self-public sphere in the urban space of Athens, mainly addressed to the international art world. Under the direction of Adam Simcik, the project addressed the European South, considering being an unexplored territory to discover cultural others, inviting intellectuals and art tourists to experience the collapsing social and economic infrastructure of Athens. The Athenian marginalized the landscape, the revealed place par excellence for Documenta, which activated of a range of art practices, absolutely transforming land usage in terms of art. Indeed, the exhibition through a range of art practices spread to the city's location, extending interest beyond what an average audience might access in an art visit. Having set the operations center in the neighborhood of Exarchia, Documenta spread the works of artists across the entire city to venues and locations, including museums, theaters, libraries, cinemas, archives, universities, public squares, streets, clubs, shops, park paths, workspaces, apartments, even the Athens first cemetery, sometimes for only to find a small brick of copper to listen to sounds or to see a locked, empty building. The exhibition of Documenta produced a touristic guide with which send the visitors around the circles or to the opposite end of the city, emphasizing space and subjectivities of the economically depressed Athens, producing a new brand built on the Greek multiple crisis, which were exploited as a cultural product, animating the highly capitalized global art system. The curatorial team of Documenta, working for almost 3 years in Athens, collaborated with 34 Greek cultural bodies, the Aegean Airlines, and the Athens Tourism Partnership. And through a strong marketing strategy, Athens was proposed to the international media, being Southern Europe's new art capital. Interestingly, the presence of foreign artists, the establishment of new art around spaces and residences, as well as the subcultures in neighborhoods, are supposed to be evidence of the emergence of a new cultural hub in the European periphery. Since human cleverness, desires, motivation, imagination, and creativity are replacing location, natural resources, and market access as urban resources, the potential of creativity works as a solving agent of urban dereliction through courageous public initiatives and business investments. In the well-known book, The Rise of the Creative Class, Richard Florida prescribes a new urban regeneration scheme through 3T, that is tolerance, talent, and technology. According to Florida, when cities exemplify this 3T, creativity is transformed into an engine of growth and economic prosperity. Regarding Athens, creativity introduces version of alternative hype cultural lifestyle in Athens, serving mild forms of cultural entrepreneurship on which the current Athenian cultural economy is built. It's about the production of new creative destination in the European South, which directs to the global cultural consumer. In other words, the ongoing establishment of art initiatives in Athens are proceedings without the interest of the locals, making this creative dynamics contradictory and ambivalent. As the critic theorist Malcolm Miles asserts, creative city strategy is about an invert urban revolution as the rich rise up to expel the poor to the social, cultural, and economic margins. Today, creativity constructs narratives of place and communities through hybrid localities, building a foundation of new forms of cosmopolitanism, primarily targeted to a global consumer community. In this regard, creativity comes out as an abstract technical product of complex interaction and power relations. As the French philosopher Alain Badiou underlined, the current urban strategies produce a weighing between the economically developed residential areas and all kinds of favela, ghetto, barrios, and refugee camps. Participatory creative practices, therefore, can only be located where there is no capital available for creative-led urbanism, allowing art to produce cultural models closely linked to autonomous forms of social organization. Those collective practices based on the notion of free association and often of sharing produce a common place able to express and activate alternative forms of uses and belonging of the city. One such case concerns the autonomous art centers that can be squatted, rented, or cooperatively owned, and they include elements such as workshops, art shops, and spaces for exhibition, meetings, cultural events, and residencies. The autonomous art centers provide ways of free association and participatory action to those who understand creativity as practice of coexistence, co-creation, and sharing. A second case is the community art project in marginalized urban location that builds bridges between creation and community participation, which unites, strengthens, and revitalizes slums. Within a real commitment to communities, artists compose ways of collaborating and co-creating in the context of improvement of the marginalization in that not belonging in the brightness sides of cities or in those belonging anywhere or nowhere. From the moment that segregation and exclusion are globally spreading out to the societies, we can take some lessons from the autonomous create collectives as they influence a unique form of activity that holds the potential of unfairing society's creative energies, but goes beyond the individual artist's creative practices. That means we have to reconsider the art domain as an agent working with and not as a representative of society. The reinstitution of the arts domain today is an important innovation in the dialogue about the future of local cultures in the world, as well as the ontology of cities themselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will proceed with the second presentation.
Okay, thank you.
We can have questions after the presentations, I think. Please. Well, the title of the second presentation is Envisaging Trees as Social Agents in a Process of Urban Transformation by Stephen Melemis. We have to share
the PowerPoint. Now,
I don't know if the full...
I'm used to the Mac setup, but maybe it's this. No, I would like... How do you get full screen?
Full screen is there. I don't understand you. Control.
Control Alt. Okay.
Control L.
Control L. Okay. Mind? Okay. Well, I'll, while the screen is coming up, here it is. That's it. Okay. Hello. My name is Stephen Melemis. I'm an architect and a professor in an architecture school where I do design studios and theoretical courses. But I'm also part of a design collective called Bazar Urbain, which is mainly based in Grenoble. And it's as a member of that collective that I'm going to speak to you today. I'm especially pleased to be at a congress about participative urbanism in Athens after having worked here for 6 years from 2010, 7 years, 2010 to 2017 with students from Paris in a design studio about what could be done in spite of the crisis conditions in the western sector of Athens. But today I'm going to speak to you about a study I'm working on currently with the Green Party municipal government of Grenoble as a member of the collective Bazar Urbain. We're more or less in the middle of the study, which is to extend over a period of just a year. The name of the call for projects that we were awarded is La Stratégie de l'Arbre, roughly translating as a tree strategy or a tree strategy. The brief mentioned the municipal government's decision to develop an approach to the presence of trees in the city that would go beyond the usual role to which they are relegated. That is, as ornamental elements, adorning streets and parks, and as occasional shade providers. The strategy that the city wanted to have defined would involve almost doubling the number of trees in the city in such a way as to produce tangible benefits to the urban environment. The 30% figure coverage of what's called canopy, technically called canopy, it was based on things going on in other cities in the world. The unstated stake behind the project is nothing less than the future habitability of Grenoble as the effects of global warming become manifest, making the city unbearably hot and its air quality unacceptably poor for some of the spring and most of the summer. The thing about Grenoble is that its geographic situation is in a narrow and deep valley between high mountains, which makes it extremely vulnerable in terms of the effects of global warming. It's already uncomfortable and polluted enough in terms of temperature at this point. We proposed starting from the benchmark the city's politicians had adopted, which involved going from the current 15% of coverage of the city's surface with trees to around 30. This was a number that environmental studies in other cities had shown to be necessary in similar cities with similar geographic conditions. We proposed to sort of start by work to go beyond this this figure by considering trees not only as elements, as tools or as resources, but as social agents in the fullest sense. Put differently, seeing them as subjects around which a constellation of relations, human relations obviously, but also technological and biotic ones, could take form. This meant considering trees as more than simply environmental instruments, but rather, as I've said already, pointed the way to a collective process of reimagining the city as a life place, to borrow a term from the bioregionalist vocabulary. We thought that we would go as far as proposing that the idea of trees as sentient beings and inhabitants whose health and protection should be guaranteed by commonly admitted sets of rules. All this implied a kind of leap in political imagination to a future iteration of the city whose ground would be filled with trees, around whom, at least in certain areas, a degree of biodiversity could develop in relation to human activities. While this position might seem a bit extreme, we felt and still feel it's justified in the sense that our survival on Earth in the coming decades might well depend on the development of care and empathy on our part for non-human life. In any case, the politicians we're in contact with accept this leap as a possibility, though don't really seem entirely ready yet to commit to it. Around these ideas, we've been organizing a process of work with engineers and technicians on the one hand, and city inhabitants on the other. Here, as always, our goal was to collect situated spatial narratives that could inform our understanding of what trees mean to people, and how they use, interact with, or consider them on a daily basis. And so, before going any further, I'm sorry, I should really be showing you some images. We should stop the full screen. Okay, all right, the full screen doesn't work. Okay. Okay, well, I'll continue while you're. Okay, I should say a word about how we work as a collective to make all of this clearer. It's a 20-year-old group comprised of 8 core members, 5 architects, 2 city planners, and a sociologist. All but one of us teach in universities, and all of us do research, often together. For this study, we were 2 architects and a sociologist working alongside a landscape architect office that we're close to, and also with a forester and an environmentalist. Our common research culture was, as a collective, was formed through several years of association with the research group Cresson at the Grenoble School of Architecture, which focuses on the sensual lived experience of collective spaces. Its approach is rooted in a qualitative social science position that very seldom involves direct questionnaires with yes or no answers, and which may make a careful and very limited use of quantitative data. Maybe my approach is different than others that have been presented here in the sense that we really don't believe, we don't ourselves use quantitative data to model. We prefer to concentrate on walks, situated walks in which we record what people say and analyze and build on that basis. We also don't do projects ourselves, though we're architects and planners within the framework of the collective. We may do them elsewhere, which allows us to focus in a kind of, to be much freer in thinking about not so much projects as the conditions of possibility for effective design through contact with inhabitants and stakeholders. And so we build our project-oriented work studies around different sorts of trajectories in and through public space. I can change now? Okay. Yes, so here, an image from a study that we did for the Place de la République in Paris, which was later renovated, in which we did a variety of walks with inhabitants of the area, inhabitants of Paris who only occasionally go through the Place de la République, with the kiosk owners in the area, and people with handicaps, children, etc. So there were a number of walks that were done in this particular instance. Our position in such walks is that such walks can define processes if they're carried out according to sets of rules that have been adapted to the situation at hand, reflecting the places, the people, and the urban issues at stake. These sets of rules, or protocols, as we like to call them, include the recording of what is said, exactly where, and in relation to what. For this reason, we use, in various ways, according to the situation, sound recorders, videos, photographs, and drawings. We also use other means for evoking the everyday experience of participants. Actually, this is a map of a study we did in Amiens. It's in which you see various walks that were done on foot, in some cases on bikes, on cars, so that different scales of territorial scales could be examined in the study. Okay, we use other means, for example, maps. But when we use maps, we situate them, we place them in situations that allow us to meet and speak in the most casual way with people as possible. So here, for example, a piece of an aerial photograph of the territory of Amiens, placed in front of the cathedral on a Sunday afternoon. People would walk by on their way to the market or the church and would stop at this sort of unusual object. We would engage them in conversation, and things that they said would be recorded on Post-its, little pieces of paper, and stuck directly on the plan. It's an example of one tactic that we use to get people to discuss things in our practice. One thing I want to say is that we have kind of constructed this practice a bit against the idea of public consultations in auditoriums. We find that those situations tend to favor people who are at ease with public speaking, or to be self-serving to those who are conducting the sessions, who tend to be architects or politicians or planners who basically want to have their ideas legitimated by whatever means. What seems to us more interesting is the idea of collecting and creating here. Sorry, I'm technically not very organized today. Okay, all right. What we do when we've recorded these situated narratives is then to compile them into, we'll take pieces of what people said without modifying what they've said, and we'll put them together with what other people have said to create thematic, to sort of bring forward thematics for projects. Here, we'll then, in as much as it's possible, make these fabricated narratives that we call meta narratives available to the public as well as to stakeholders in the form of books, because we feel that this is a way of kind of validating that we haven't been abusive in the way of using the narratives that we've collected. Okay, now I want to get back to the study. All right. Yeah. I just want to evoke several aspects of what we did. First of all, we applied this idea of urban walks recently to the project in Grenoble, starting with technicians and engineers who work for the city and for the region. We defined in this case what line through the city, what trajectory the walk would be done, and we invited these people to do that walk in part on foot and in part on bicycles with us. And it was really quite interesting to see how the perspectives of people who worked in this, specifically in the tree department of the city, could discuss with people who work in on issues like infrastructure, hard infrastructure for water and electricity, etc. It was really quite amazing because we understood at that point that each of them had a very different understanding of these spaces, and that they were very, very seldom crossed. There were very few instances in which these people had discussed with each other. And this brought us to a fundamental question which concerned what I would call a governance based on the atmosphere, concerning the ground and concerning atmosphere. In particular, we were really quite stunned by the fact that so little was known about, that there was no global knowledge of what's in the ground, where the roots of trees can go, where the hard infrastructure is, where just exactly what the foundations of built elements look like, and all that sort of stuff. And it occurred to us that one of the first things we needed to do was to create an atlas in which these things could start to be recorded, and therefore, circulate among the different actors, but also become public knowledge. The atlas would also then have to deal with the surface around trees, and also with the surface, the volume of air around and space around their canopies with respect to buildings, etc. So the first element is the atlas. That atlas, we started to compile the information to make it, and discovered that it was actually very hard to do. People didn't necessarily let go of information very readily, or if they did, it was in the form of representations that weren't especially communicative, etc. So it's actually an enormous job to compile this stuff and to make some kind of synthesis out of it. And we're not going to be able to do that entirely, but at least we'll be able to propose this as a starting point for that work. I want to get to the last point because I think I may be running out of time here, which concerns the 30% canopy coverage. Okay, well, it's okay. Actually, I'm going to just speak, and maybe at the end, if you in the discussion, I can show things if or not. The PDF, yeah, one of them. Okay. Okay. Actually, we were very surprised because in the preliminary studies, we came to understand that the city of Grenoble, which had just launched an ambitious program of tree planting, even before our study started. When we looked at that program carefully, we realized that it didn't come anywhere near satisfying the 30% benchmark that they had set for 40 years from then. It was barely enough to maintain the amount of coverage in the city that existed already, which was about 15, which led us to the conclusion that if the city was to be habitable, it would have to radically change. Streets would have to get reduced in dimension or even disappear. That large spaces like parking lots would have to be reduced, or at least rendered permeable and planted to some degree, and that a certain number of spaces that are, near rivers and forests and areas that are just simply not constructed for the moment would have to be allowed to grow densely, and we even have to be encouraged. This led us to a kind of the conclusion that we would have to have a public dialogue, not only about the lived experience of the city, but also about what it could become. And we're in the process now of trying to set all this up. The framework in which we want this to happen is what we have decided to call the Parlement de l'Arbre, the Parliament of Trees, which is a series of elements, a series of formats, walks, discussions, lectures, exhibitions, that should be ongoing over the next few years, and that should allow technicians, city technicians, and the public to interact, which is something which is not often done, and which we're seeing actually a lot of reticence towards at this point. It's not an idea that's going over very well. That the idea, as you may have guessed, of the Parliament of Trees is based on Bruno Latour's concept of the Parliament of the Parliament of Things and Living Beings. We can speak more about that later if you're interested. Very quickly to conclude, this is one compilation of images. Oh no, okay. It's okay, don't worry about it. I was going to show you some examples of photographs that were taken during different urban walks, where we see a variety of urban conditions in which trees are present. Here is a kind of a map. Okay, thanks. Here's a map where we've indicated a number of spaces that have a particular concentration of trees. Yes, okay, all right, here. Sorry, I'm not.
Can I help you?
Okay, this is not.
Sorry, can I help you?
Yeah, yes, go ahead. The second one, okay, all right. So, very simply, a series of photographs that are situated with respect to the map and commented, and around which the different participants in the walk, about which different participants in the walk would have something to say. You know, under where that tree where those two people are sitting in the shade, there are a certain number of things going on. We know up to a point what it is, but not entirely, et cetera, et cetera. I'm going to conclude with that. I hope that this has been reasonably clear. It's a little bit complicated to talk about a study that's only half finished. This whole idea of the Parliament of Trees is something which is yet to come. We've had only one preliminary meeting to set it up with members of the city, and it was actually pretty promising in the sense that the idea of an approach which is both scientific, techno-scientific, and turned towards lived experience and affect was something that actually worked pretty well. The technicians were, many of them were kind of just a bit ill at ease to tell us that, in fact, in their daily work, trees are a nuisance, that they spend a lot of their time trying to cut off parts of them, eliminate them, reduce the amount of space around them in order to be able to fit in another bit of underground infrastructure, et cetera. And so the issue was we kind of found it very interesting that these people were themselves divided on the issue. And that seemed to us an important aspect of the whole experience, collective experience of transition, ecological transition. Thank you.
Well, the third presentation is from Teresa Carlone and Matteo Mannocchi. The title is Stakeholder Engagement in NBS for Hydro-meteo Hazards, Aim and Monitoring Strategy in OPERANDUM project.
I'm here. Hi, everybody. Hi. Thank you for hosting me. I'm going to be the only one speaking because Matteo is not available this morning, and I'm sorry for not being there. I wish I was there, but due to seasonal flu, I cannot leave Italy, so I'm here I'm there virtually. So I'm going to start sharing my screen for the with the presentation that I have. And okay, yeah, are you able to see that? Yeah, awesome. First of all, I would like to maybe ask some questions to the previous presentation, because I think it's very interesting, and it applies a lot of tools and participatory tools that I've been dealing with in my research and my activity. I am a research fellow of the University of Bologna, Department of Sociology, and I am my field of research is stakeholder engagement and citizen science in environmental and urban policies. So I am extremely interested in the topic that was presented before. As today, I'm going to share with you some experience in another project that I'm working on, which is the OPERANDUM project, which is not specifically related to urban policies. It's most rural policy, but deals with the hydro-meteorological risk reduction, the NBS. So here today, I would like to share with you colleagues and other researchers the monitoring strategy of the stakeholder engagement that we did in the last 3 years for the experimentation of NBS to reduce hydrometeorological hazards. Climate change and this risk reduction. In the last year, due to climate change, we are witnessing an increase of hydrometeorological events such floods, drought, landslide, and heat waves, as already kind of shown in the previous presentation. And those events had a huge impact on society and natural ecosystem. So the OPERANDUM project, which was launched in 2018, aim to reduce the hydrometeorological risk in European rural territories through co-created, tested, and demonstrated innovative nature-based solution. Let me say that OPERANDUM project, which is focused on rural area, lead a wider field of research in the NBS solution to reduce hydrometeorological risk. And we are currently, just right this specific, this very month of November 2021, we are starting also a new project which try to apply NBS in urban area using the heritage, let's say, of OPERANDUM and all the lessons learned in OPERANDUM, specifically the stakeholder engagement strategy and the monitoring strategy that I'm going to show you. So even if it's not specifically linked to the urban area, this project is like of a previous experimentation of what we are going to apply to urban area. Okay, what are NBS? For those who are not familiar to this term, are solutions that are inspired and supported by nature. So this solution provide environmental, social, and economic benefits and help build resilience by bringing natural feature into cities and landscape. This is NBS are encountering a very huge interest on national and international organizations such as the International Union for Conservation of Nature, but also the UN and the EU are increasingly giving attention to those specific natural infrastructure, as the gray and hybrid infrastructure are shown to not be as efficient as successful into fighting and mitigating the hazards that comes from climate change. So how OPERANDUM work? This is an innovative, let's say, kind of innovative approach, because it's one of the first project that deals with nature-based solution and rural area and co-design approach. we saw, as people that work with environmental policy and researchers that are interested in urban policy, that the co-design approach and the co-development and the co-deployment approach, it's widely and largely used in urban planning, especially in the field related to environmental policies. But there are very few projects and actions that oriented this approach towards rural area. And that's why OPERANDUM, it's kind of a pioneering project, because in order to reduce hydrometeorological risk in rural European territories, it applies the same approach that has been used in the last 20 years, let's say, in urban area, and try to experiment how NBS can first have an impact on rural environmental planning, and can be promoted for business exploitation. This is another huge step, because of course the funding and investment and interest in urban area regarding the climate change and the mitigation of climate change, it's very hype. But in rural area, because of a lot of factors that I'm not going through to discuss with you today, this approach, the nature-based solution, are not very well developed. That's why OPERANDUM trying to overcome this gap of both data and knowledge and acceptance and mainstreaming through the evidence, to science evidence for the usability of NBS also in rural area, and the usability of NBS that has been designed and developed through a participatory process. By doing so, the OPERANDUM project focused with extremely high attention on the engagement on multiple levels of stakeholder, because the main idea is to increase knowledge and acceptance and mainstreaming of NBS at various levels, and let's say society awareness, political use, and policy implementation of NBS. And in fact, the project aimed to strengthen the local framework for NBS-based policy and the promotion of technology and innovation in this policy. But as I said before, the OPERANDUM project is a very site-specific and innovative NBS project in which NBS are co-designed, co-developed, deployed, and tested and demonstrated with partners and local stakeholders in 7 European open-air laboratories, which can be considered as a natural and rural living labs that covers a wide range of hazards with different climate projection, land use, and socioeconomic characteristics. So the research done in each of these OAL can help structure and carry on a comparative analysis, which is the good side and the bad side of OPERANDUM, because of course working in a very climate and socio-cultural context, it's hard because you have like very few layers to compare. But on the other hand, open up to a very interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary research challenges that can be very stimulating and can help the research and the scientific knowledge to improve in a very challenging manner. Given this complexity and giving all the differences in the climate condition and socio-cultural assets, the OAL apply what it's called the socio-ecological analysis approach. And we will see later on how that approach steer and help the project to build a strategy, not just an engagement strategy, but also a monitoring strategy. That is something that we are currently work on. Like in this very moment, we are applying the strategy at all level, and hopefully we will get some results in 1 year when the project it's about to finish, because the project will last until December 2022. So in this very moment, we are specifically applying the strategy that I'm going to show you based on the socio-ecological analysis approach. Due to a time restriction, and because, as I said before, there are a lot of differences among OIL, I'm going to focus on OIL Italy. That has specific characteristic because it's partially different from others OIL, which focus on just one site. And so there is also an OIL in Greece, which is close to Athens. I will give you more information on the chat later if you are interested in that, given the proximity to the city of Athens. But as I said, the OIL Italy is located in Podigoro, Bellocchio Beach, and Panaro River, and they are exposed to a different range of hazards such as floods, droughts, and storm surge. I will leave you the ArcGIS map to, if you are interested in giving it a look at the complexity of these OIL. But I can I can pinpoint some specific critical aspects, which are the needs of managing a complex communication flow, because of course there are three different sites that needs to be considered as a whole, and different kind of researcher and all members are working in this specific site. So, I mean, you can see the complexity of the structure, and that complexity, of course, need a very focused managing of communication flux. And most of all, there is a need of constant update of the state of the art in terms of stakeholder involvement and engagement, together with update of the state of the art of environmental development. Okay, so as I said, the OPERANDUM project is based mainly on what is called co-creation process, and meaning a participatory process. Participatory process that is divided into, here we use the standard methodology, because co-creation process can be structured in a very different way, but here in this specific project, our theoretical framework is the standard framework, which divided the transdisciplinary process in 4 phases: co-design, co-development, co-deployment, and monitoring. And each of these phases needs this group of stakeholders. And the challenging thing is that each phase require a mapping of the stakeholder, an update of the stakeholder, and share everyone's need and define together with the stakeholder the guidelines of the project. So it's a iterative, as we're gonna see later, is an iterative process. It's very energy and time consuming, and you need to keep the stakeholder constantly informed and involved, and requires a lot of effort and competencies. That's why I am very glad to work in such a transdisciplinary team, because we combine each competence, like the more technical, the more natural oriented, the more social, the more design oriented in the process. So the approach is what's called human-centered design. And in OIL Italy, we specifically create the stakeholder forum that is designed for specific need of OIL Italy. Because as I said before, OIL Italy, it's a large OIL with multiple sites and collect geographically dispersed stakeholders. So the idea to keep them all together, we create a permanent working group that could reinforce the sense of unity of the OIL as a whole. The stakeholder forum is composed mostly of representatives of each group that was mapped as a stakeholder, meaning for, local actors, experts, technical consultant, policymaker, other researcher, institution, like governance, water governance institution. So you see, like the panorama, it's very huge and heterogeneous. And the idea to create the stakeholder forum is to try to keep them together and to keep them involved in a homogeneous way. And of course, to improve the outcome of NBS experimentation, because the more you get stakeholder involvement, the more you can see that there is a social acceptance, there is a knowledge increase. You see that a lot of stakeholders are responsible and are owning the results of the project. So you wanted to keep them involved because you want the project to keep going on, even when the project funding will be end. So what are the forum objectives? As I said, increase NBS knowledge, acceptance, and mainstreaming, and help upscaling the NBS on hydrometeorological risk reduction, not just in experimental way, such as OPERANDUM, but in terms of creating a more structured framework, theoretical framework, to help policymaker and to include the NBS option within the environmental policy and the land planning. So the forum proposed for the identification of best practice and lesson learned at OIL co-creation process. It serves as a periodic monitoring, which is the main focus of this presentation, because provide a continuous feedback loop and help us in develop the policy recommendation. And most of all, the forum, it's a test platform for OPERANDUM ICT instrument, which is the JOIKP, which is something that I'm not going through because it will require another session, but that's a tool that is developed within OPERANDUM to help the procedure, the involvement procedure to keep going when the process will end, and to crowd mapping and crowd create a database on NBS. So to summarize here the co-creation process in OPERANDUM, you see the three main pillars: the co-design, the co-development, and co-deployment. But the most important thing, that it's something that I am going to discuss right now, it's about the monitoring co-creation process, which is a constant activity that it's required in the project. Why it's important to monitoring the stakeholder engagement activity, because it's important to evaluate the process of participation in terms of acceptance and engagement and involvement in the process itself, because it helps give the whole evaluation of the process through the involvement indicators. And there is a strategy that we set to identify what kind of indicators will better help us in evaluate the process. And the monitoring strategy is essential because we need to select what kind of indicator will measure something that is often related to quality of involvement. And that's the challenging part. And we try to overcome the challenging part in identify qualitative and quantitative methods. And we saw that in a socio-ecological approach, that is the winning, let's say, framework, because it will help fully understand what are the outcome and the impact of the project. So we identify indicators of impact and outcome, which are within a bigger set of indicators that I will show you later, because those indicators provide a sign of how much you have achieved in the change that you were hoping as a result of the project. So indicators of impact and outcome are about measuring the change. So how much your project, the effort you put, the money you put, the human resources you put into the change will or have brought or have produced changes, and what the community, like the science community, the citizen, the policymaker community has learned from the project itself. It's a kind of measuring the investment that you made in the project in terms not just of financial investment, but also knowledge, capabilities, acceptance, and mainstreaming of, in this case, NBS. Why monitoring stakeholder engagement? Because, of course, as we saw before, it's a crucial pillar of co-creation in design and implement a nature-based solution to address major hydrometeorological risk. In order to be successful, for the stakeholder engagement to be successful, we need to set a monitoring strategy capable of what works and what doesn't, and how through the project we can make changes and we make alteration of our initial idea in terms of activities and events to reach the project objective. And as I said before, it's crucial to identify qualitative and quantitative indicators. So we see in the left side of the slide how the socio-ecological approach require a monitoring of both environmental and social aspect, because it's an approach that keeps together the two aspects. And because open air laboratories are complex, interconnected biophysical and socioeconomic system, they require a wide range of data for the monitoring and evaluation. So this is, as I said, a very complex aspect. And we came up with these indicators. This is like the first selection of indicators that we made months ago. Now we are in the middle of selection of these indicators that are, as I said, input indicator, process indicator, output, outcome, and impact. And we are trying through this strategy, so through a participatory strategy, to identify the best indicators to measure and monitoring the stakeholder engagement with stakeholder, by keep that stakeholder engaged. So we try to guarantee a context base, meaning refer to the context in which we are working. And in this case that I'm presenting you is the whole Italy. And we are selecting together with the stakeholder what can be appropriate indicators to reflect the socio-ecological system at its best, and the socio-ecological system in which the project OPERANDUM want to have an impact. And so you see this, as I said, reiterative process in which the indicator are selected and the data are collected, because of course, you know, indicators are based on data and the collection of data. And then after these data are collected and after the indicators are filled with those data, we open up discussion with stakeholders to prove or to measure or to verify if those indicators are appropriate, are indicated for the context, or if they need to, of course, to be reviewed or to be wider or to be changed. So that's still an open process. And we came up with the approach that a successful stakeholder engagement monitoring should be integrated with the technical and performance measurement activity, as I said, because it keeps together the natural aspect and the social ecological aspect of the socio-ecological system. And it's important to identify a balanced number of indicators that can be used to evaluate the changes that are directly attributable to the project, in this case, OPERANDUM. So this is pretty much everything. It's not everything, it's a very strict tentative of explaining you the complexity of OPERANDUM. This is a strategy that we came up with this year. And we are, as I said at the beginning, we are currently applying this strategy. Hopefully in 1 year, we will get feedback from the strategy and see if this strategy is correct or it's not correct. And if we need to adjust it, or if we can use it as a monitoring strategy to steer other monitoring strategy in other NBS related projects all over Europe and hopefully beyond Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So now, if there are any questions to the speakers or any comment, you can also make questions through the Q&A section of the Zoom, the internet. And if there is anyone that would like to speak from here.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry I came late, so I didn't hear the two first presentations. But I mean, do address the questions to the four panelists or just to the? Okay. So the question will be following. What is the place of conflict within all these programs of work, considering that there is often, at least from what I see from France, a lot of discrepancy between environmental concerns and on one hand and social concerns, and that sometimes, and especially in popular neighborhoods, don't fit together when greening it can be taken as a way of gentrification, or for example. So how do you make with these discrepancies or conflicts when they arise? I mean,
the question is for...
Someone other than someone. All right, quickly. I absolutely agree that these presentations, when we try to be concise, don't always succeed. The aspect of controversy tends to kind of disappear, it's something that requires, I mean, dealing with these controversies requires specific rules. I don't know how to say it otherwise. They have to be identified, and then they have to be delicately sort of unfolded or something like that. In the case of our work, I'm sure that we're going to come across some controversies in the coming months, but they haven't appeared yet. They have a way of staying implicit for a long time before they're actually brought out. I think between the Green Party politicians, for example, who are very enthusiastic about the ideas that we can put forward and their capacity to realize them, there's already a big gap. Just to talk about the controversies that can occur in the project we're doing, the technicians feel divided within themselves, and it's hard to know at what point they might just revert back to doing what they've always done out of for the sake of simplicity, or whether they'll push themselves. And then there are the people in between, those who are trying to translate from the political realm to the technological realm, who feel pressured. They're afraid of how politicians will hear what their technicians are saying, and vice versa. So yeah, I mean, these questions are there, and it's true that we probably should speak of them more. Anyway.
Is there any other question or comment?
I do. Hi.
Okay.
Yeah, as I said, I was really interested in the previous presentation. Sorry, I don't recall the name. I'm sorry, I'm very bad with names. And I'm asking because I saw you use a lot of crowd mapping activity and a lot of tools that are used mostly in the participatory urban planning that I am interested in because I worked with a foundation that did that in Italy, and we did use a lot of these tools, and I found these tools very useful and extremely engaging for people because they can be protagonists of the planning itself. So I would like to have some feedbacks on how it goes after the event itself. So you did this activity with Post-it and mapping. So after that, I don't know, you report to the citizen, you, maybe I missed a point, but how was the procedure to keep those people kind of informed, or if they wanted to be informed or if they don't want to be informed, because it's always a crucial matter, meaning after the specific site-specific activity of engagement, how do you keep them aware of what you're doing, or how much their activity had an impact on bigger planning activity, or if it doesn't, or that's the main question. It is something that I am still working on as a research. So how you keep that sustainable and how you keep them informed.
Very much.
Okay, no, thanks for the question and thanks for your presentation. It would be really nice to have a moment to speak later on about because we're at different places in similar processes. But what I would say is that in general, we have this three-step thing where we collect we do the terrain visits, the collection of narratives, then we analyze them, and then in as much as possible we restore them. We call it restitution in French. I don't know exactly how what translation there would be, and that's really the hardest part. It's the hardest part, so we have to use a variety of means. Sometimes we've used blogs, we've created online radio programs that people can access. Sometimes we post, like when we work on villages, we post the results physically on the wall in the center square. It really is, it's specific in every project. And at this point, what we're going to be relying on for the tree project is the fact that Grenoble is going to be the green capital of Europe this coming year, Capitale Verte. And we're going to be combining a series of walking events, exhibition, and meetings we're looking for a sort of a playful format that would allow technicians and the public to meet. And so the event will allow us to kind of draw these different elements into relation and to make them known. But beyond that, in the future, I really don't know what we'll do. We'd like this parliament, this tree parliament idea to go on for several years, and we don't really know yet how it can be structured.
Is there any other comment or question? Okay, if there's not, we can end the session here. Proceed to the other sessions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.